Well, interestingly, I spent 3 years in the Peace Corps, and I said when I get home, and I had a wife and a baby to support, I said the only thing I won't do is substitute teach for some of the reasons that Ellen mentioned. So after being 3 years with hair down to here, sandals, a tupenu because I lived in the South Seas, and uh, and hadn't spoken English much at all except to my wife in a long time, I ended up being a substitute teacher in a kindergarten classroom. And the rest is history. I spent 36 years in education. I retired at age 60, and I've now begun my next chapter as a land steward. I steward about 600 acres, and my family and I have made 8 miles of trails and stone stairs and stone benches and a kiosk and a privy. Of course, you got to have a privy. And David Summerstein actually came and did a video postcard with us, and so a shout out to him. I guess he's here today as well. So if you see him, tell him hola from the Carney stewardship team. But going back, when you really want something, it can make you quite nervous. And I never, aside from my wife, I'd never really wanted anything quite as bad as to move back to the North Country. I grew up in the Eastern Adirondacks. I spent about 10 years away, starting with my senior year of high school as a Rotary Exchange student in Brazil, and several years in the Peace Corps, and several years in higher ed. So 10 years transpired, and I said, and we had a baby, and I said, I want to get back to the North Country. I love the Adirondacks. I'm a Winter 46er. I've done the Northville Placid Trail. I'm a trail steward in the Adirondacks. I said, I want to get back there. I want to be reinvigorated by my North Country roots. So I heard about a job in Carthage. So, I really wasn't ready for prime time, having lived in the Peace Corps and in higher ed where things are pretty relaxed and whatnot. And here I was going to kind of a conservative small town in the North Country to apply for a job. So I got in my pickup truck and drove by my parents' house in the Eastern Adirondacks. And of course, my father always had really sage advice. So he said, Matt, and he pulled out a bottle of Listerine. He said, when you get to the interview, I know you're going to drink some coffee at Stewart's before you go. He said, make sure you rinse before you go in for the interview. So anyway, from anybody else, if they gave me a bottle of Listerine, I'd be insulted. From my dad, I felt only love, so I put it in my case and drove off to Carthage. I got there a little early, and I said, well, I really better do what Dad said because Dad always gave me good advice. So I opened the truck door. I leaned out. I had my only tie on. The tie came out with the motion of my body, and I dribbled down the tie. And it was one of those ties that, really showed that it was wet. So anyway, to make a long story short, I said, well, I got to do this. I'm going to go in. I'm nervous about it. I really would like this job. There was a lot of exciting things happening in the school district. Camp Drum was becoming Fort Drum. I knew it was going to be a place where I could live in the country. I could live near my beloved Adirondacks. I could live where there's a lot of snow. I love snow. And maybe live out in the country and still have my children go to a school that is diverse. And so I was really, really pretty nervous about it. But things worked out well. In fact, so well in the first interview that I immediately went to the local realtor. His name's Mike. And I said, Mike, do you have some place with 5 or 6 acres where, I could raise a family? And he gave me some listings, and the least likely one had 140 acres, and it was a rickety farmhouse, still in the Carthage district because as an idealist, I wanted to live in the district I worked in. A kind of a rough part of the district, though, and a rough-looking house. But I drove up that little one-lane road in northern Lewis County and saw that house, and I said, this is where it's happening. This is where I'm raising my family. There was no furnace. That's all there was a rickety house and a coal burning stove that had been used with wood. And So of course, it was before cell phones, so I got in my truck, drove back into Carthage, found the first cell phone, and I said, Linda, I found us a house. I know where we want to. We're going to raise our children there. It's going to be great. And she said, "Oh, did you get the job?" And I said, "Well, no, I didn't get the job, but I found a house, so there's hope." So anyway, I did get the job, thank goodness, and we did buy the house, and it was a wonderful career of 30 years at Carthage. 30 of my 36 years were at Carthage. Working in education in a small North Country town certainly has its advantages and disadvantages. A disadvantage is that it's not like teaching in Brooklyn. You know, when you teach in Brooklyn, and I've taught in urban settings as well, you go home, your life is your own. You do whatever you want to do. When you teach in Carthage, your life is no longer your own, because you live in the community, you see people, heaven forbid they see you, drinking a beer at the bar or whatever. I don't know. At least that's the way I kind of felt. And I tried to live my life accordingly. Got involved in a lot of clubs and organizations and coached both at the high school level and in the community level, and just really became, I think, an integral part of the community, and also was a committee on special education chairperson. So when I got the job, they said, well, okay, you're a middle school guidance counselor for whatever, 600 kids, and you're also going to be the COH chairperson, Committee on the Handicap, which has since become the Committee on Special Education. Well, we had the temporary housing for Fort Drum in our district, so we had tons of students coming in from other countries and from all over the United States who had individual educational plans. So they all had to be translated. So I would stay at work until, so that they could get integrated into our school system. And then oftentimes they would be there for a month or two, and then they'd go to another district. But we had to do the work because we were where they started in New York State. So I'd get home at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and I always remember one time getting home, and I'm thinking, well, Linda must be in bed. So went up to the bedroom. Linda's not up to the bedroom, and I kind of yell, and the dogs are barking, but I couldn't find her. So I went down into our basement, and there's Linda in her snowsuit with our 3-year-old daughter in her snowsuit, and the house is about 30 degrees, and she's trying to get that darn coal burner started, and it wouldn't start, and the house was kind of getting smoky, and it just was a challenge. So there were some challenges to moving into that rickety old house. Let's put it that way. There were some challenges. Of course, the house is beautiful now, 30 years later. Had a wonderful 30-year career at Carthage, and I'm now in my next chapter as a land steward on the Baker Woods Preserve and as a trail steward in the Adirondacks. And it feels pretty good looking back at it. And, I'm happy to be here. I actually came here to see Wreck-It Ralph. And the ladies grabbed me as I came in the door and said, look, Matt Carney can't make it, so you have to speak in his stead. So happy holidays.